Hey, David, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Michael. Great to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to having you share more about your story. I mean, you started a company called Tekyz. Might just take a moment and share with everyone the kind of work that you do and how long you've been doing it for.
Okay. Well, we do custom software development for startups and scale-ups primarily. I didn't start there, and I started it 17 years ago, Tekyz, um, uh, right after a failure. So I had an early success in the 90s. Uh, a company I founded in um, 92, and it exited in 2000 after it grew to 800 customers in 22 countries. Sold it to, it was legit software business, logistics, route distribution, inventory management. So we were before SaaS was SaaS, we were we would license the software to people that were in the food distribution business. And uh, and then I was VP of products for the acquiring company for the next few years until I cast about. I had another software startup, and that one failed. So uh, it was in the automotive industry for automotive wholesalers, and I was trying to create a network where wholesalers could source cars for their customers from other wholesalers or dealerships. And I actually was getting a number of people that were on the network, but I didn't want to charge for it until I had funding, and I didn't know how to raise money. And frankly, what I should have done is just started charging for it right away and not worried about the funding. And that was a hard lesson to learn.
I was going to ask you, David, is there anything that stands out? I mean, in addition to maybe not charging right away, that you feel separated the success that you had with your first company, which you ended up exiting in 2000, and then the subsequent company that you launched, and as you said, kind of failed. You know, it didn't work out as well. What separates those two?
It completely failed, by the way. It completely failed. Just to be honest, I ended up shutting it down. So the primary thing was I didn't charge right from the beginning. That was the reason why it failed. There's other reasons I could say why it failed, because I was offered investment, but at really bad terms. I would have had to give up 45% of the company for like a little over $1 million. And it just seemed like way too much. And that was right at the beginning of me trying to raise money. Once I turned it down, then it wasn't a possibility again. But if I had started charging right from the beginning, I would not, it might have been a little bit harder to figure out the right perfect product market fit, but people would have bought it. I wouldn't have had to raise money, or at least not as soon. And if I did go raise money, I would have had revenue, and it would have been much easier to do.
Today, you're running Tekyz, right? Custom software development for startups and scale-ups. Some people have probably not heard the term scale-up before. I think everyone's heard of startup, but what does a scale-up mean? How do you define that?
Well, I define that as any startup that's already achieved revenue. They have a ideal customer profile, and they're generating revenue, and hopefully they're generating enough revenue that their cost of sale versus the lifetime value of that customer, that there's a high enough ratio, that there's enough profit in there that they can invest back in the business. Because if not, then they haven't found product market fit yet.
I know today and we're going to talk more about this, you built a business to 12 team members, a bunch more contractors. You're looking to grow that significantly. Let's kind of pull back though for a moment, because your core clients are startups and scale-ups. Startups are a very interesting type of client to have, because a lot of people are excited. A lot of consultants want to work with startups. There's the freedom, the excitement, the innovation. But one of the big challenges is that startups don't necessarily have big budgets. Right. Or they're very hesitant to make investments. They're trying to be scrappy, as in many cases they should be. How did you view that? Why did you decide to focus on startups, and what have you found works or doesn't work when trying to, build a business where startups are a key part of that client base?
I got involved with startups because I was already networked in the startup community because I was trying to raise money for my previous company, which was a software SaaS company again. And when you're trying to raise money, you naturally fall into the startup community because you've got all these people raising money. So that's how I ended up getting connected in the startup. And when I decided to close down the business, there were a number of people there wanting to do software startups and they were non-technical founders. And so it was just a natural sort of segue for me to then start to do take on projects, which is how I kept the business going for all these years, was purely through networking up until recently. So there's not necessarily a good reason to be in the startup community other than the things you said. The problem with startups, aside from the money, there are startups with money, right? People get friends and family money when they decide they're going to start something, or, there are plenty of startups that have enough funding to build their MVP and do some marketing. The problem with startups is they don't have any discipline or understanding of what needs to happen in what order. And so they usually set themselves up for failure right in the early stages. And nobody's telling them otherwise because most people don't know.
Do you do something to qualify people early on? Because just imagine as you're talking to a lot of startups, some, as you said, obviously will have the ability to fund the work, but others might just be excited about what they could potentially be doing, but they're not yet serious enough to write that check, if you will. What do you do? What does your sales process look like? How do you make sure that you're not spending a bunch of time talking to people that will never become buyers?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. And you're the first person I've talked to on a podcast that's asked me that question. So, and I love that question because I have a really good answer for it. But in the first 5 minutes of talking with a potential customer, I don't know if they're really a potential customer yet, but they're talking like they want to build something. I always ask them, first of all, I say, when do you expect to start the project? And if they say probably in the next year, I don't have funding yet, that sort of thing, I say, oh, great. I'll spend a little time with you and give you an idea of what this will cost. But I can't give you an estimate because that's what they want, is an estimate to go to an investor. And I'm not going to do that because we do very detailed, very elaborate estimates, and it's costly. I'm happy to do it when somebody has a budget and they have the intention of starting, knowing they may not, but still the intention and the commitment's there. So if they say, no, I want to get started right away, then I say, do you have the budget for this, or how much have you budgeted for this? They usually say, well, I don't know how much the budget is, or I want you to tell me that. And I always say, I understand. And if I were you, I'd want the same thing. However, you're asking me now to do a lot of work for you. And I'm not asking for anything in return other than understanding what the feasibility of this is. So they say, well, I don't really know what my budget is. And I say, yeah, I know. Most people know what they can't afford if they don't know their budget. And then I say, is it 10 to 20,000, 20 to 40,000, 40 to 80,000, 80 to 100. And I will not stop doubling until they stop me. And they always stop me either at a 1 above or 2 above where their budget is. So I get to 160,000. They go, oh no, there's no way I could spend that much, because that's what they hear. And somehow the last thing I say is what they think I'm expecting them to pay. I don't know why. They say I couldn't go above 80,000 every single time. I can't tell you how many hundreds of times I've done this. And I've had 3 people not give me a number, not give me the number. And the only reason, and when they don't, I won't do the estimate. Even if I believe they have a budget, I just won't, because if they're not willing to give me that, then I can see this is going to be a vendor relationship, not a consultative relationship, and I'll exit the call.
There are consultants out there landing dream clients, charging premium fees, and building the kind of business and life that you want. And here's the thing, they're not smarter or more talented than you. They've just got the right strategy. If you're tired of guessing your way through the next steps, wondering if you should raise your fees, change your marketing strategy, or find better clients, it's time to stop spinning your wheels. At Consulting Success, we've helped thousands of consultants just like you cut through the noise, get crystal clear on their goals, and build businesses that thrive. And the best part, it all starts with a free Consulting Success growth session. This is your chance to get personalized guidance on how to break through your challenges and build a business you deserve. No fluff, no gimmicks, just real strategies that work. So why not you? Why not today? Go to consultingsuccess.com/grow and book your free session now. Let's take the guesswork out of growing your consulting business. Again, visit
consultingsuccess.com/grow today.
I think what you just said right now is incredibly important. And I want everyone who's joining us to really pay attention to that. I mean, you're willing to turn down, kind of walk away from potential business when you see a sign that even though you might take that business on, you probably would end up regretting that you took it on, because it's not going to be the kind of relationship that you want to have. You know, the market is full of more opportunities than any one company can handle. And so saying no to the wrong things so you have the availability to say yes to the right things is incredibly important. It's scary for those who haven't yet built their business to the level of confidence and pipeline. But, take it from what David has built, what, my experience as well, this becomes very, very critical. Okay. So let's kind of move forward in the story a little bit. You launched Tekyz. You were networking in the startup community, and anyone that's done that before, and I remember what that was like, is with previous businesses that I had, you just start meeting a lot of people, going to similar events. You see the same people over and over, right? There's just referrals, all that kind of stuff is happening. At one point, you brought on a partner. You had a partner in this business. You no longer have a partner today. What worked? What didn't work? What kind of lessons did you learn? What would you caution somebody or suggest that somebody really think about if they are considering a partner relationship, or maybe they're already in a partnership? What lessons? What can you share?
Well, first of all, I recommend people not get into partnerships, because it is the rare partnership that works really well in a synergistic way for years. Some partnerships can start out strong, but then eventually somebody is going to feel like they deserve more, or that they're being put upon by the other partner. And it is just impossible to keep that parity forever. In rare cases, there are examples of really successful companies that have maintained these types of partnerships or create enough of a wall between the responsibilities that, but in general, it just is really difficult to make it work. So I was looking for a partner to help me do business development, right? And somebody I knew that was already in the business, and he had his own consulting company. And we were looking at sort of merging the two things, although his was much smaller than mine. But I didn't care. What I cared about is he had a lot of contacts. And so, and somebody had known for years. So it took him on as a partner, and we worked that way for 4 years or so. And I recognized that, he was waiting for things to fall in his lap, and he wasn't doing the business development, the outreach, and being creative about trying to anyway, it just wasn't happening. And so we weren't growing, and he was taking half the business. But it was still in my name. And so I agreed that when I did split, because I was careful not to tangle myself up too much here, I said, anything that business that you've brought in, you'll continue to get the same kind of share of that business. But going forward, it's, I'm taking Tekyz back. And
what would you have done differently, David? Like, the benefit of hindsight, if you were to get into a partnership, I know you said you don't necessarily recommend partnerships, but for some people, there's lots of value in bringing in a partner. If you were to do that one over again with a partner, what would you have done differently in terms of like structuring agreements, expectations, like anything?
Yeah, I would. What I would have done is look for somebody who was willing to make a big commitment in terms of personal investment. So I'm going to hand over half the business to you, or whatever the partnership arrangement is, as soon as you reach these milestones. But you're going to commit to reaching these milestones within a certain period of time, and they have to be big enough that our business has grown as a result significantly. And if that happens, and there's enough evidence that they can continue to do this, then so structure it like that. I'd structure it so that once they reach that milestone and they now are officially vested partner, the process of getting there proved their ability to bring in the kind of business or whatever it is you're bringing them in for, and to continue to do that.
This is your third business that I know of, at least. Maybe there's others before
and during. Yeah, I'm still involved in a partnership which was one of my clients very early on at Tekyz, and I'm still the acting CTO for that company. That one's been a real struggle in the healthcare industry, but and we're launching some SaaS products this year, which will will spin off as independent companies.
So let's come back to those. What I'm interested in really looking at and hearing from you is you went through acquiring clients through referrals. What was the first kind of big challenge, aside from the partnership kind of struggles, if you will? But what was the big first challenge that really stood out for you? Something that was maybe a little bit challenging to overcome, or really made you start to kind of wonder if you did it at any times, like, is this the right business, or am I the right person, or do I need to make any changes? Anything kind of come back for you in terms of?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can talk about that really clearly because I have an arc in my mind, what we've gone through. The first thing was being able, originally I was taking projects on and I was contracting people to do delivery, and I would project management, and I have technical skills too, but we're taking on projects where I need a team. So I wasn't going to be doing the work, and I was trying to grow a business beyond my ability to just deliver stuff. So at first, it was trying to figure out how to identify contractors who had quality and commitment and integrity and all the things you need. And eventually, I realized you have to have core team members on your own team that are driving this.
What you realized was you need to have full-time core team members as opposed to just contractors.
Yeah, you can have a blend, but you can't just have contractors unless you are really lucky. But for the most part, most contractors, especially if you're contracting a firm, your chances of them really delivering on time and quality and with the level of detail that's really necessary for you to build any kind of brand is very, very small. There are chances that will be successful. So I started basically some of the independent individual contractors. I found an outlier in one of my testers. This is 12 years ago. A woman who was just incredibly detailed and seemed to be holding a lot of pieces together. Anyway, so I found her, I hired her, and every 2 years or so I'd move her up because give her more responsibility than she thought she could handle. And she's now my director of operations and runs all the development.
Yeah.
And finding people like that. So we have somebody like that in as our lead architect. That we have somebody like that as in a couple different technology verticals.
Let me ask you before you go on the story, let me ask a question about this. One of the challenges, or I guess questions that people have as they're in a similar position where there's kind of the roller coaster of work is coming in, they need more team members or to expand the team, but sometimes they don't feel comfortable going out to try and hire somebody when they don't have the revenue to necessarily support that new person. What was your mindset, and how, what do you recommend now to people? Are you on the side of hire before you even need the person and figure out a way to make it work financially, or build your bench of talent that you can pull on when you need them? Or do you think about it in some other way?
I think about it that you've got to have the revenue to be able to support the person. Otherwise, you might hire them and then fire them later on because business turned down. So you got to have at least enough revenue that you feel comfortable, even if you feel comfortable that you can carry that person for a year or so, and with the intention of growing your business to then get beyond it. Is that may delay your ability to enjoy profits from the business, right? And you need to make a living from it. You may just not be growing that living much while you're bringing in some initial core people, but you have to have enough to fund them.
Yeah. So would you stay with contractors in that position? Like, let's say you need people to help you with projects, but if you didn't have enough of a revenue runway to support hiring somebody full time, as you're saying, is your suggestion then, or your experience, just use contractors as needed until you get the revenue in the business to a point where you can comfortably bring on more full-time people?
That's what I did. I don't know that I would change that, either that or, because the problem is you just don't know your ability until you're in a predictable growth model. You don't know your ability to bring in new revenue. So, and to grow your revenue. And if you're hiring people with a promise that this is a job for them or a career for them for the next 10 years. But you're lying to them because you only have enough money to carry them for 3 months if you don't get that next project, then to me, that's an integrity issue. So it doesn't feel right to me to do that. Because then if I do end up having to let them go, then I have to be honest with them at that point. And then everybody else on my team's going, why did you hire them in the first place? Am I safe? It's just, I don't want to be caught in a lie ever. So I just don't lie. And that's the only way not to. And that's a whole philosophy around our business, actually. So in terms of how we've grown it. So the biggest problem we had initially was being able to ensure quality and consistency and delivery from build to build, release to release. And it took us a while to build the team where we could guarantee that. But then we did it by brute force for a while. And we kept building the protocols and the disciplines and the playbooks on how to deliver. Because the idea is if you can't use them as references and the kind of reference that say they're amazing. If they say they're going to have it done on this day, it'll be done on that day. And it's going to be, if it's not bug free, it's going to be really well tested. And if you can't get your references to say that, then it's really tough to grow your business, right? But to do that, that requires, a lot of things. So you'll know on my website, it says hyper exceptional software development team. That took of the 17 years we've been doing that, it probably spent the last 10 years really building that capability. And anybody who really runs an exceptional team has artifacts they produce that typical teams don't produce. And those artifacts are your evidence when you're talking to somebody new and say, I don't want you to believe me, because saying trust me is quote code for you can't trust me, right? So let me show you what I mean. And here's how the things that we do that people have told us make us exceptional.
Well, give everyone an example. They're like, what are one or two things that you do? Because I think that is powerful to have those points of distinction and differentiation kind of at hand. So what does that look like?
Okay. Yeah. And I'll give you a few, only because I think it kind of triangulates it a little bit. One of them is how we do estimates. Our estimates are very detailed. It's we have, make a big investment for a project that we don't yet have anytime that we do an estimate, but we want the estimate to be accurate. We want it to reflect the requirements, the thing we're going to build, to the degree that we can possibly know what we're going to build before we get started. And usually we're pretty good at our estimates. So we're not off by a factor of 2x or 3x or 4x, like what is typical in the startup contracting world. We're off by a factor of, 10 or 15% or 20%, depending on, and we build those buffers in to our estimates and all those buffers are visible too. So when we build an estimate, we have a low and a high, and even the low has buffer in it, and it's broken down by all the modules we're going to build, and a detailed description of each of these modules. And a module is a component that can't be more than 9 days of development.
So that's one thing you do differently. Most say, here's, we'll get you quickly, whatever, but it's way off the mark. You take more time. It's very detailed. It costs you obviously more money then, as you're not charging for it. But for you, that's a point of differentiation. What else?
Okay. And we continue to do that throughout the project because, and we're capturing actuals versus what the estimates were on small pieces on the project, on how much burn we expect on a monthly basis. And we report on it weekly with the client. Here's what we estimated. Here's the actual. This is where the time went in each of these different areas, DevOps and development and testing. I don't know other companies that do this with the client every week, in a quick 15, 20-minute status. Another big one, and I think it's big because every time I tell other development shops, they go, "Oh no, we don't have we're not tracking things to the level of detail where you can do this." I used to do blended rates like a lot of development shops do, where you charge one rate and that's sort of your blend for all the different skill sets. But then people would get uncomfortable towards the end of the life cycle of a big module because most of it's testing, and it seems like you're charging a lot for all these testing hours when all the developers aren't focused on your. And I thought, okay, you know what? I I could easily make an argument why that shouldn't be the case, but I can also see if I were them, I might feel the same way. So now I went to actual rates for each skill set, right? Every person on the team has a certain rate. And then sometimes they would feel like, well, somebody worked 180 or 190 hours because we had a big delivery and it was a weekend, and they want to know, what did they spend all their this much time on that month? And I was like, and it always feels like they're questioning my integrity. And I know they're not. They're asking the same questions I would be asking. I just don't want to be in that position. So we just started attaching the daily timesheets to every single monthly invoice, so the client can audit us, full transparency on what everybody did every day.
Question for you on that. So you've chosen to use hourly rates, right? And you have a value assigned to each team member. Why hourly rates? Why not project rates? Why not a monthly retainer? Why not some other form of pricing, where for a lot of people, and when we look at this, it's like it's could be harder to scale the business, harder to grow the business beyond when everything is tied directly to time and not necessarily as much to value. So how do you think about that connection between hourly fees and value and potential limitations, or maybe in your mind, benefits of using that approach?
We used to do exclusively fixed price, but then it's very difficult to control scope of a project when it's fixed price, because because you have to anticipate everything that you believe that the customer implied in terms of the requirements. And we're really good at documenting requirements in a lot of detail, but it becomes a huge overhead factor in terms of our time and in terms of the client's time to go back and say, this is a change, and then estimating the change, which we do anytime there is a change, we estimate the effort, right? But it just becomes it becomes a messy process to do it fixed price. We still do some fixed price, but but rarely. The 90% of our work is time and is hourly. The problem with doing like a monthly retainer is that's even more abstracted than blended rates, because basically you're saying, our guys are this much rates, and we're going to spend on average this many hours a month, and so that's how you come up with your retainer number, right? And if you get above a certain amount of hours, then we're going to have to charge you some accelerated fee on top of that for every hour they work. And now the clients are feeling like they're being taken advantage of because you're nickel and diming them instead of giving them. And so I didn't want to get into that. Nobody ever questions me on an invoice because they have all the information and evidence that they need. They have access to the project management systems. They can go digging through that all they want from the beginning of the project till whenever. So, and I find that transparency is one of those levels of it being exceptional, which is hard to do unless you're tracking everything at that level of detail.
You mentioned, David, that the business has really grown just on the back of referrals and your network, word of mouth so far. But recently, you've looked at expanding beyond that to grow the business. Can you talk a little bit about why now you're open to doing things a little bit differently, and what are you doing, if anything is working yet? Love to hear it.
Okay, sure. And my goal is, and the reason I want to do it now is because I'm ready to grow the business beyond myself. So I want it to be able to run and sustain itself without my involvement. But that means I have to have enough infrastructure and ownership in that infrastructure to be able to drive the business forward, right? Which means I have to have enough revenue that's supporting that infrastructure. So that was the motivation. And I gave myself a few years to achieve that. And for me to do that, I have to create some kind of predictable, scalable model that I can predict that we can achieve this level of growth every quarter or every year in a predictable fashion, which means being able to identify a growing amount of business during, over the, and to be able to, in a way that if we add more energy to the system, it will grow that reach. So that's what I've been working on over the last year, is building that system.
Yeah, makes sense. You talked about kind of the arc of the business, and having somebody come in early stage every couple of years, moving them to a new role that challenges them. Is there anything that you've learned in, over the years of running different businesses, and especially this one, that you use when it comes to hiring people and really making sure that you're getting people that can, play at that, like as an A player and really perform for you?
Mhm. Yeah, that and also another really good question, and something I say very often is only hire somebody if they're smarter than I am. Um, and and my director only hires somebody if they're smarter than her. And it rolls uphill, so to speak, because what you want to do be in a position is the people that you're in support of, you want to be getting all their impediments out of the way so that they can build the business and build value, not having to carry them and nurture them so that they can perform well enough to your standards. So we look, number one, above anything else, we look for intellect. They have to be smart enough so that everybody in the team feels like this person's added value.
Right. To interrupt, how do you identify that? How are you identifying intellect? Like certain questions, assessments? What's
Yeah. But so we go through an assessment process with people. We have them. We always have them do some coding for us, usually in a contract role. So we'll just say, here's a weekend of work or 2 weekends of work or whatever, and we'll pay you for this fair rate if you want the job, but you've got to do it because we can't tell. And if they deliver it and they can explain the work that they've done that shows that they really understand the work really well, then and that's clean and it's well documented and right, it's structured properly and they built it really quick, then we know that we're dealing with somebody that's skilled but really smart as well. Because there's a big difference between just being skilled and being smart and skilled. However, if we hire somebody, and it has happened where they cheated on this, and we find out in the first week or two they're not performing anywhere near as well as they did, we fire them right away. Not because we can prove they cheated, but just because it's obvious that this isn't the right person. And we do that because, and this was a difficult thing to teach my team, but the longer you carry somebody that really isn't a good fit for the team, number one, you're delaying their ability to move on and find something that's a good fit for them, but you are sending a message to your team that you don't value them enough to protect them from somebody that isn't to the level of quality that you're asking everybody else to deliver. And so, they won't make it 2 or 3 weeks at the most if they truly weren't a good fit, except in the rarest cases, where it's like, not quite sure, we want to give them just a chance. But for the most part, it's pretty fast. And the rest of the team becomes brutal because they want to protect the team.
Okay, so that was one. I think you were able to share maybe one other thing that you do in the hiring process or to really bring on those A players.
It has actually evolved beyond me at this point. So I couldn't tell you all of the steps that we go through anymore to hire our.
Let me ask you then another question. I'll take it a different direction, which is AI, right? Everyone's talking about AI, right? And coding is something that AI can now do. There's, Cursor and Replit and all these other services and sites and so forth that people are using. How do you view that? I mean, you're doing custom coding. There's now AI that can do coding for you. I'm sure it's coming up in sales conversations. I'm sure you've talked to your team about it. But what is not just your stance? I'm more interested for you, David, as a leader. Has this changed your how's it changed your strategy, your positioning? How do you think about building a business that is based on something that AI is, from the outside, at least it looks like starting to eat into quite a bit?
It's changed everything and it's changing everything. And for the last year and a half, I keep thinking, how do I position us so that a year from now or 2 years from now, it's relevant, whatever I'm positioning, right? And I've had a lot of philosophical conversations with my team and my customers as well. And I embrace AI. I look at it like this: it's 100 foot. I live in San Diego area, so of course, surfing metaphor is what I'm going to use, right? And the typical development team can surf comfortably in a 3 or 4 foot wave. We call ourselves hyper exceptional, so metaphorically, we're surfing in 8 to 10 foot waves. and here's 100-foot wave coming in, and everybody can see it. And you have one of two choices. You either have to swim out, paddle out as hard as you can and try to stand up in the wave, or wait till it comes and wash over you. And if you get up into the wave, then you stand on the tip of your board and you just try to stay ahead of that crest. So that's how I look at AI, from metaphorically. And that's what we've been doing. We've been testing and benchmarking different ways of building things. And AI is involved in every single one of our projects with our clients in terms of implementing AI, as well as how we're using AI to help us develop software. Replit, Bolt, VO, tools like that, none of them build good code yet, and none of them can build the code without anything of sophistication, even a little sophistication, without you wanting to pull your hair out, because it gets, it gets stuck in loops, it breaks. Something that was working before, you have to figure out how to prompt it so that coach it along very delicately. And we've spent a lot of time in the last 6 months, especially in the last 3 months, on those exact tools that you mentioned.
So it sounds like, David, you're saying, like, right now in your space, there's immense potential, but to really get the most out of it, to the point where somebody could say, hey, we can build, instead of working with you guys to do this in a custom fashion, we can just do this ourselves with AI. It's not there yet, or nowhere near there.
It won't. Well, I say nowhere near there. No, it's not anywhere near there yet. But at the rate things are accelerating, I don't expect it to be too much longer before a lot of those gaps are starting to be filled, and it's not getting into the loops, and it's able to structure code much more intelligently and things like that. I mean, you can try to prompt it along, but if you ask Replit to build an app for you, a simple app, right? It's going to be really poorly coded. And that's true with Bolt, and that's true with, with all the tools that I've used. They just don't. So Cursor's a really great tool. Same problem though. I mean, you still have to be a coder to manage an app, and using Cursor to help you with the coding, but it speeds things up a lot. So I've just recently reduced most of my estimates by 30%, which is a huge amount when you think about building a first app. And that's being a little conservative. I think that it's actually even more than that.
But you're saying that you're doing that because you're able to increase your efficiency and effectiveness by you and your team using these tools. So you're passing on some of those savings to your clients.
Right. And we're also shifting our whole approach to development. Our objective is to have developers be independent delivery agents, as opposed to be the developer and have separate QA and have, right. And instead, the developer is responsible for a certain portion of the application, and they're building it. They're building their own test scripts because they can automate all this. We already automate all the check-in and automated testing parts, and now they're just creating the test scripts themselves instead of us having somebody that's a separate QA automation person that builds that. And that way, a developer can create a new function, add it to the app in 3 days, push it to the library, and it automatically goes into automated tests. And if it passes everything, it goes to smoke testing for somebody in QA just to touch everything to make sure that there isn't anything wrong before it goes into production. And eventually, we won't even need that. We'll get smart enough where they can push it right into production.
Yeah, I think the big thing here for everyone, because not everyone is going to be following along with all the technical stuff and the process that you've laid out, but it's that you could view AI in two ways, right? You can either view AI as, and I think these are both important questions for everyone to ask themselves and to talk to their team about and their clients, as you've been doing. But first is, what's the impact of AI on our specific business and industry, right? Is it a threat? Is it an opportunity? But how does it change the landscape, if at all? And likely there are going to be some changes that you want to take it into account. But then the second one, which you've also been doing, David, which is great, is looking at how do we use AI to be a better company? How do we use AI to be more effective for our clients? So I think for everyone, if you haven't considered those two questions and come up with clear answers for them, then that's something that you should definitely be doing, because AI is only going to get better from here. It's not a question of, is this the future, or like, is this real? It is real, and it's not going anywhere. It's only going to continue to evolve and improve. David, I want to thank you for coming on. I want to just, conscious of the time that we have in the calendar here, and so I want to make sure that people can learn more about you and Tekyz and everything you guys have going on. So where's the best place for them to go? Can you give the URL or domain that people should go to check that out a little bit more?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that too. Michael, they can go to tekyz.com, which is how we spell Tekyz. So I'll say it again, tekyz.com. You can email me directly, which the email link won't be in the show notes, but I will say it for anybody that makes it to the end of this podcast, right? It's david@tekyz.com. And if you look me up on LinkedIn, it's easy to find me on LinkedIn, just David Hirschfeld, and or search for Tekyz. So yeah, please give me a call if you just have any questions. I like being helpful. Even if there's not a project there, I'm happy to be helpful. If somebody's struggling with another development team, they're not sure what to do, or they're considering a new project and they're not sure how to approach it. If nothing else, I can at least give you some direction.
We'll wrap it there, David. Thank you again so much for coming on. We'll have the website linked in the show notes over at consultingsuccess.com. And thanks again for coming on.
And thank you for having me, Michael.